The morning sun filtered through the massive transparent dome of Centaurus Academy, painting everything in shades of gold and blue. Students poured into the central gymnasium, their voices creating a strange symphony of sounds that no Earth concert hall could ever match. There were clicks, whistles, harmonic hums, and the occasional sound that felt more like pressure against your eardrums than actual noise. Tyler walked in quietly, keeping to the edges like he'd learned to do over the past 3 months. Being the only human at an intergalactic school meant you got used to being invisible. He wasn't strong like the Kryn students with their 4 massive arms and bodies built like walking tanks. He wasn't fast like the Velocians who could cross the gym in a blur before you even blinked. He was just average. Average height, average build, brown hair that never quite stayed in place, and absolutely nothing special to offer in a school full of species that could do extraordinary things. Near the back wall, almost hidden behind a cluster of equipment, Kira waited in her mobility chair. The device hummed and whined with a sound that made Tyler wince every time he heard it. It was clearly struggling, clearly failing, and clearly the only thing keeping her upright. Kira herself was beautiful in an alien way. Her species, the Ceruleans, had long serpentine bodies covered in scales that shifted between deep blue and silver depending on the light. They normally moved by floating, their bodies rippling through the air like ribbons in water. But Kira couldn't do that anymore. The accident, whatever it had been, destroyed the special organs that let her people fly. Now she was stuck in that terrible chair, trying to pretend she didn't notice the stairs. Everyone attention now. The voice boomed across the gymnasium like thunder. Instructor Vex strode to the center of the floor, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. He was Kryn, one of the warrior species that practically ran the galactic military. His exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, black as obsidian and twice as hard. 2 smaller arms rested on his hips while his primary arms stayed crossed, a posture that screamed authority and judgment in equal measure. The students fell silent immediately. Even the Velocians stopped their endless fidgeting. Today we begin something that separates the capable from the worthless, Vex announced, his voice carrying that edge of satisfaction that bullies get when they're about to watch someone fail. The Valdris Preserve Survival Course. 40 kilometers of wilderness terrain. 3 checkpoints. 2 days to complete. You will work in pairs. Excitement rippled through the crowd. The Kryn students flexed their considerable muscles, already sizing each other up as partners. The Velocians grinned with too many teeth, practically vibrating with anticipation. Even the Laminians, who were usually calm and collected, showed interest by brightening the crystalline structures that made up their bodies. Tyler felt his stomach sink. Partner activities were always the worst. Nobody wanted the human. Why would they? He couldn't keep up with Velocian speed, couldn't match Kryn's strength, had no special abilities whatsoever. He was just the weird species from that little blue planet nobody had heard of until recently. Partners will be assigned randomly, Vex continued, and Tyler felt a small spark of hope. At least random meant he'd get someone. Though I suspect some pairings will prove more challenging than others. Vex's black eyes swept across the gymnasium and landed directly on Kira. His mandibles clicked together in a way that couldn't mean anything good. Tyler had been around enough aliens to recognize disgust when he saw it, even on a face that looked nothing like human. Some of you will learn quickly that physical limitation has no place in elite training, Vex said, still staring at Kira. The message was crystal clear. Near the front of the crowd, Thorn laughed. He was the Academy's star athlete, a Kryn who'd won every competition he'd entered since enrollment. His primary arms were thicker than Tyler's entire torso. Hey Kira, he called out, his voice dripping with mock concern. Make sure to bring extra batteries for that chair. Wouldn't want you dying out there. Oh wait, you'll probably die anyway. His friends erupted in laughter. Other students didn't join in, but they didn't defend her either. They just looked away, suddenly fascinated by their own feet or the ceiling or anything that wasn't the disabled Cerulean girl and her failing mobility chair. Tyler watched Kira's scales shift from silver to a dull gray. He'd learned that meant shame or sadness in her species. Her body seemed to curl tighter, trying to take up less space, trying to disappear. Something hot and angry stirred in Tyler's chest. He recognized that look, that posture. He'd seen it in the mirror back on Earth during his first year of high school when he'd been the short kid, the weak kid, the one picked last for everything. He remembered how it felt to be invisible, to be dismissed before you even got a chance to try. Now then, Vex said, pulling up a holographic display. Let me announce the pairings. Thorn, you're with Kexlor. Velocity team of Quick and Dash. And for our special case. He paused, his mandibles clicking with what could only be amusement. Who wants to volunteer to partner with Kira? The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler could hear his own heartbeat. Around him, students suddenly became very interested in their data pads, their claws, their tentacles, anything to avoid making eye contact with the instructor. Seconds ticked by. The silence stretched longer, becoming painful, becoming cruel. Kira's scales had gone almost completely gray now. Her head lowered, and Tyler realized she was trying not to cry. Did Ceruleans even cry? He didn't know, but the emotion was universal enough to recognize. As I expected, Vex said with satisfaction. Perhaps we should simply disqualify. I'll do it. Tyler's voice surprised him as much as everyone else. He hadn't planned to speak. The words just came out, pushed by that same stubborn part of him that had kept him going through every dismissal, every being picked last, every time someone assumed he couldn't do something just because he was small or human or different. Every head in the gymnasium turned toward him. Multiple types of eyes in colors that didn't exist in Earth's spectrum, all focused on the human standing in the back. Tyler walked forward through the crowd. Students parted for him, staring like he'd just volunteered to jump out an airlock. Maybe he had, in a way. Vex's expression was unreadable behind his alien features, but his tone carried surprise. The human? You understand this course is designed to challenge elite physical specimens from across the galaxy? Species that have evolved for strength, speed, and survival capabilities far beyond your own. I understand, Tyler said, stopping beside Kira's chair. He looked down at her, really looked at her, and saw past the broken chair and the gray scales to the person underneath. Her eyes, large and golden with vertical pupils, stared up at him with confusion and something that might have been hope. Thorn's laughter rang out again, louder this time. Oh, this is perfect. The cripple and the nobody. I give them 6 hours before they quit. Maybe 3. His friends joined in. Other students didn't laugh, but Tyler caught smiles, heard whispers. The general consensus was clear. This partnership was a joke, a guaranteed failure, entertainment for everyone else. Tyler ignored them. He'd had plenty of practice ignoring bullies. Instead, he knelt down beside Kira's chair so they were at eye level. Up close, he could see her scales shifting nervously, could see the intelligence in those golden eyes, could see someone who was tired of being dismissed and diminished. I'm Tyler, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. I know we don't know each other. I know everyone thinks we're going to fail. But I also know that back on Earth, humans have a saying, never leave anyone behind. So here's my question for you, Kira. Do you want to prove every single one of them wrong? For a long moment, Kira just stared at him. Her scales rippled through several colors, surprise, confusion, and then something brighter. Silver-blue determination. Yes, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. Yes, I really do. Tyler smiled and stood up, offering his hand in a very human gesture. After a second, Kira extended her bioelectric field, and he felt a tingling sensation against his palm, her version of a handshake. Then let's do this, Tyler said. Behind them, Thorn was still laughing. Around them, students whispered and made bets on how quickly they'd fail. Instructor Vex watched with those cold black eyes, clearly expecting this to be a lesson in why physical limitation had no place in his program. But Tyler had learned something growing up on Earth, something that a galaxy full of stronger and faster species didn't seem to understand. Strength wasn't just about muscles. Speed wasn't just about how fast you could run. And sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to give up on someone when everyone else already had. They had 2 days, 40 kilometers, and everyone betting against them. Tyler figured those were pretty good odds for an underdog story. The transport shuttle dropped them at the edge of the Valdris Preserve just as the sun was climbing over the horizon. Tyler stepped off the ramp and immediately understood why this place had a reputation. The wilderness stretched out before them like something from a fantasy novel. Dense forests with trees that had purple bark and leaves that shimmered like metal, rolling hills covered in vegetation that moved on its own, and in the distance, rocky terrain that looked sharp enough to cut through boots. Around them, teams were already taking off. Thorn and his Kryn partner didn't even wait for the shuttle to fully land before they jumped off and started running. Their powerful legs ate up ground like it was nothing, covering in seconds what would take Tyler minutes. The Voloshan teams were even more impressive, disappearing into the forest so fast they were just blurs of color and motion. Within 3 minutes, the landing zone was empty except for Tyler and Kira. Well, Tyler said, adjusting the straps on his backpack, at least we don't have to deal with traffic. He tried to make it sound light, but his stomach was doing flips. 40 kilometers. Through alien wilderness. While carrying a partner who couldn't walk. What had he been thinking? Kira's mobility chair hummed beside him, the sound even worse out here in the quiet of the wilderness. Tyler, we should assess what we're working with. My chair has maybe 3 hours of battery life on flat ground. This terrain. She looked at the forest ahead, at the roots and rocks and uneven ground. We won't make it half a kilometer. Then we'll figure something else out, Tyler said, starting to walk. Come on, let's at least try. They made it exactly 470 meters before reality hit them hard. The forest floor was covered in roots that twisted and turned like frozen snakes. Kira's chair, designed for smooth academy hallways, kept getting stuck. The small wheels weren't meant for this. Every few meters, Tyler had to stop and help lift the chair over obstacles while Kira tried to use her weak bioelectric field to make herself lighter. It wasn't working. They were moving at a crawl, and Tyler could hear the chair's motors straining with every push. Then came the smell. Burning electronics mixed with something like melted plastic. Tyler, stop, Kira said urgently. Stop, stop, stop. He stopped. Smoke was rising from the right side of her chair. The motor made a grinding sound, a sad whine, and then died completely. The chair listed to one side and Tyler barely caught it before Kira toppled out. The right motor is gone, Kira said, her scales shifting to that gray color again. Tyler, I'm so sorry. I knew this would happen. You should just go on without me. Take the penalty for going solo. At least you'd have a chance to. No. Tyler cut her off. He was already lowering his backpack, his mind racing. That's not happening. Just give me a minute to think. Think about what? I can't walk, Tyler. I don't have legs. My hover organs are destroyed. I'm dead weight, just like Thorne said. You're not dead weight, Tyler said firmly, pulling equipment out of his pack. You're my partner. And back on Earth we have another saying, where there's a will, there's a way. My dad used to say that all the time when we went hiking and hit problems. Hiking is not the same as. Just trust me, okay? Tyler worked quickly, his hands moving with purpose even though his mind was only half a step ahead. He pulled out the lightweight internal frame from his backpack, the emergency cord he'd packed, and the thermal blanket. His dad had taught him about improvisation on trail hikes when they'd forgotten equipment or something broke. Make do with what you have. Adapt. Overcome. 15 minutes later, he'd created something that looked more like a bad arts and crafts project than survival gear, but it would work. He'd fashioned a carrier using the pack frame, reinforced with cord, padded with the blanket. It sat high on his back with straps that distributed weight across his shoulders and hips. Okay, he said, positioning himself in front of Kira. This is going to feel weird, but I need you to use whatever bioelectric field you have left to lift yourself up. I'll guide you onto my back and you can hold onto my shoulders. Kira stared at the carrier, then at Tyler, then back at the carrier. Tyler, I weigh 43 kilograms. You can't possibly carry me for 40 kilometers. That's insane. Humans aren't built for. Humans are built for exactly this, Tyler interrupted. He crouched down, presenting his back to her. Did they teach you about Earth species in your xenobiology classes? Some basic overview. Then they probably told you humans are weak compared to most species. Not as strong as Kryn, not as fast as Velotians, no special abilities. Right. Yes, Kira admitted. What they probably didn't tell you is what humans are actually good at. We're endurance hunters, Kira. Back on Earth, before we had weapons or technology, you know how our ancestors caught prey? They chased them. For hours. Sometimes for days. We just keep following until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We're not built for speed or strength. We're built to just keep going. That seems like a terrible evolutionary strategy. Tyler laughed. Yeah, well, it worked. We sweat to cool down so we don't overheat. Our legs are designed for efficient long-distance movement. We can regulate our breathing and heart rate consciously. Humans are basically the galaxy's best long-distance machines. We just don't look impressive doing it. He looked back at her over his shoulder. So come on. You navigate, I'll provide the engine. Deal? Kira hesitated, and Tyler could see a dozen emotions playing across her scales. Shame at needing help. Fear of being a burden. But also something else. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this crazy human knew what he was talking about. Deal, she finally said. Getting her onto his back was awkward. Kira's serpentine body was about 2 meters long, muscular and solid despite looking sleek. She used her bioelectric field to lift herself, and Tyler guided her into position. Her body settled against his back, her head near his left shoulder, her tail curving around to his right hip for balance. She gripped his shoulders carefully, afraid of hurting him. Tyler stood up slowly, feeling the weight settle across his frame. 43 kilograms. That was about 95 pounds. He'd carried heavier packs on hiking trips with his dad, but never for 40 kilometers. Never through terrain like this. How does that feel? He asked, taking a tentative step. Like I'm going to cause you to collapse before we even reach the first checkpoint, Kira said miserably. Guess we'll find out. Tyler started walking, finding his rhythm. Step, step, breathe, step, step, breathe. Don't think about the distance. Just think about the next 100 meters. In the meantime, you've got the better view up there. See anything useful? It took Kira a moment to understand what he meant. Then she lifted her head and really looked around. From her elevated position on Tyler's back, she could see over obstacles, could scan the terrain ahead. And her cerulean vision was designed for three-dimensional movement through cliff environments. She could see details Tyler would miss. There's a creek bed about 30 meters to our left, she said slowly. The vegetation is different there. Probably softer ground, easier to walk on. Perfect. That's where we're going. Tyler, that's taking us off the direct route. Direct isn't always fastest. Easier terrain means I can keep a better pace. Your job now is to find me the path that's going to let me keep moving. Can you do that? Kira was quiet for a moment, processing this shift. She wasn't dead weight. She was the navigator. She had a purpose. Yes, she said, and her scales brightened just a little. Yes, I can do that. They walked. Tyler kept his pace steady, not fast but constant. He'd learned from years of hiking with his dad that speed didn't matter nearly as much as consistency. Don't sprint and burn out. Don't stop unless you have to. Just maintain the pace and trust that steady progress adds up. As they moved through the forest, Tyler started talking. Partly to keep himself distracted from the growing ache in his legs, partly to keep Kira's mind off her worries. So here's the thing about persistence hunting, he said. The prey would be faster than us, right? A gazelle or whatever could outrun a human easy. But after a while it would have to stop to rest. Its body would overheat. And we just keep coming. Not fast, not dramatic. Just always there, always following. Eventually, the prey would be too exhausted to run anymore. That sounds terrifying, Kira said. Being hunted by something that never stops. Yeah, humans are basically the horror movie monsters of Earth's ecosystem. But it also taught us something important. You don't have to be the best. You just have to refuse to quit. An hour passed. Then two. Tyler's shirt was soaked with sweat, and his legs were starting to burn, but his breathing stayed controlled. Every hour he stopped for exactly 5 minutes. Drink water. Eat something small. Let the muscles recover without stiffening up. Then back to walking. They came across their first other team around mid-morning. 2 Velocians were sitting against a tree, their sides heaving with exhaustion. They'd burned through their energy in the first 2 hours and now had nothing left. You're still going? One of them asked Tyler in disbelief. Yep, Tyler said simply and kept walking. By noon they could see the marker for the first checkpoint in the distance. Several teams were already there resting. Tyler recognized Thorne's massive form. We actually made it, Kira whispered, wonder in her voice. 1 checkpoint down, Tyler said, allowing himself a small smile. 2 more to go. You're doing great with the navigation, by the way. Your route choices probably saved us 2 kilometers. Really? Really? See. Partnership. You spot the path, I walk it. Together we're way better than either of us alone. They logged in at the checkpoint. Thorne and his partner stared at them like they'd seen a ghost. You actually made it? Thorne said, his mandibles hanging open. I figured you'd have quit by now and called for extraction. Tyler just smiled, logged their time into the system, grabbed 2 more water pouches from the supply station and turned to leave. Wait, you're not resting? Thorne called after them. We rest when we're done, Tyler called back. Come on, Kira. Let's keep moving. As they headed toward checkpoint 2, Kira's scales were shining bright silver blue. Tyler? Yeah. Thank you. For not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on us, Tyler replied. Now, what's the terrain look like ahead? They had 30 kilometers to go and Tyler's legs were screaming, but none of that mattered. They were proving everyone wrong, one steady step at a time. Retry. The afternoon sun beat down on them like a hammer. Tyler's shirt was completely soaked through, sweat dripping down his face and stinging his eyes. His legs had moved past burning into a kind of numb ache that he knew would turn into serious pain once he stopped moving. But he didn't stop. He just kept putting one foot in front of the other, breathing in rhythm, trusting that his body would keep working if he asked it to. They passed another team around 2 in the afternoon. A pair of Kryn students were sitting in the shade, their massive bodies radiating heat like furnaces. One of them had his head between his knees, breathing hard. How are you still moving? The Kryn asked as Tyler walked past. We're built for strength and we're cooked. You're just a human. Tyler wanted to explain about thermoregulation, about how human sweat systems were actually one of the best cooling mechanisms in Earth's evolution. He wanted to talk about how Kryn bodies were amazing for short bursts of power but terrible for sustained effort and heat. But he didn't have the breath to waste on lectures. Just keep going, he said simply, and did exactly that. Kira had gotten better at navigation over the past few hours. She'd started anticipating problems before they reached them, spotting unstable ground or dense vegetation from her elevated position. Her cerulean vision could pick up details in the terrain that Tyler's human eyes completely missed. Stream crossing ahead, she said. About 200 meters. Looks wide but shallow. Rocky bottom. Can we cross it, or do we need to find another way? Kira was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes scanning the area. We can cross it. There's a section where the rocks form natural stepping stones. I can guide you across. You're getting really good at this, Tyler said. He felt her scales shift against his back, warming with what he'd learned with cerulean pleasure. I spent my whole life learning to read three-dimensional environments for flying. I just never thought I'd use those skills like this. They crossed the stream exactly as Kira described, Tyler's boots finding solid purchase on each rock she identified. On the far side they found 3 Voloshian students arguing with each other. Their team had apparently split up, with the faster member running ahead and the others unable to keep up. Now they were lost, exhausted, and turning on each other. Tyler kept walking. His pace never changed. Steady. Constant. Reliable. Around 4 in the afternoon, something changed in the sky. Dark clouds were rolling in from the west, moving way faster than weather normally moved. Tyler had grown up in Colorado and knew mountains made their own weather systems, but this was different. This was wrong. Tyler, Kira said, her voice tight. Those clouds aren't natural. Something's wrong with the preserve's weather system. How bad? I've studied meteorology as part of stellar navigation training. If I'm reading those formations correctly, we're about to get hit by a major storm. Temperature drop, high winds, heavy precipitation. How long do we have? Maybe 20 minutes. Tyler looked around. They were in relatively open terrain, heading toward a rocky area that would leave them completely exposed. Behind them he could hear other teams, their voices carrying on the wind. Ahead, through gaps in the rocks, he could see the second checkpoint. They were close, maybe 3 kilometers away. 20 minutes wasn't enough time to reach it. We need shelter, Tyler said, changing direction toward a rock formation he'd spotted. Now. But the checkpoint? Won't matter if we freeze to death. Come on. He found an outcropping of rock that formed a natural overhang, protected on 3 sides. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. Tyler lowered Kira carefully to the ground, and his legs almost buckled. He'd been carrying her for almost 8 hours straight, and his body was screaming for rest. No time for that now. The wind was already picking up, carrying the smell of rain and something electric. Tyler's hands moved on autopilot, pulling together everything his dad had taught him about emergency shelters. He used branches from nearby vegetation, anchored them against the rock with stones, and covered the framework with his emergency thermal blanket from his pack. The shelter was small and crude, but it would block wind and rain. Fire, he muttered, working faster as the first drops of rain started falling. We need fire or we're going to freeze. Tyler, you can't start a fire in this rain. Watch me. His dad's voice echoed in his memory from 100 camping trips. Always keep your tinder dry. Always carry backup. Always assume the worst and plan for it. Tyler pulled out a small waterproof container from the bottom of his pack. Inside was fire starter material he'd prepared before the trip. Dryer lint mixed with petroleum jelly, stored in a sealed bag. The rain started coming down harder. Tyler worked under the partial protection of the overhang, building a small fire structure with the driest wood he could find. His hands were shaking from exhaustion and cold, but he kept at it. Strike the ferro rod. Create sparks. Nurse the tiny flame. Add fuel gradually. 5 minutes later, a small fire was burning in their shelter, protected from the wind by the rock walls Tyler had built around it. That's when the other students started appearing. First came 2 Luminians, their crystalline bodies dulled by cold and rain. They'd never experienced weather like this on their desert home world. Then a Voloshian pair, shivering violently. Then 3 more students from different species, all looking lost and terrified. Please, one of the Luminians said, her voice crystalline and desperate. Can we share your shelter? We're dying out here. Tyler looked at his small shelter. It was barely big enough for him and Kira. Adding 7 more students would be cramped, uncomfortable, and would make the fire harder to maintain. "Get in here," he said immediately, moving to make room. "Quick before you freeze." They crammed into the shelter like puzzle pieces, bodies pressed together for warmth. Tyler kept the fire going, carefully adding fuel, adjusting airflow, doing everything he could to keep everyone warm. He shared his remaining emergency rations, giving away more than half of what he had left. Outside, the storm raged. Wind howled through the rocks, rain came down in sheets, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees in 30 minutes. Inside the shelter, 9 students from 7 different species huddled together, kept alive by a fire built by human hands using techniques that were thousands of years old. "How did you know how to do this?" asked Quick, one of the Velocians. His teeth were chattering, but he was alive. "Build shelter, make fire, survive?" "My dad taught me," Tyler said, feeding another small branch into the flames. "He used to take me camping in the Rocky Mountains every summer. Taught me that nature doesn't care how advanced your species is or what technology you have. Out here it's just you and the elements. So you better know the basics." "The basics saved our lives," the Luminian said quietly. "Our species has climate-controlled cities. We've never needed to learn this. We would have died out here." Tyler didn't say anything to that. He just kept the fire going and watched the storm through the shelter opening. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Tyler's mind wandered to Thorn and the other teams that had been ahead of them. Had they found shelter? Were they okay? He hoped so, despite everything. Around midnight, Tyler's data pad beeped with an emergency alert. Kira checked hers too. 3 teams have been evacuated due to hypothermia, she read aloud. Including Thorn's team. They're calling it a critical weather system failure. The preserve's controls malfunctioned. The students in the shelter exchanged looks. They'd survived something that had taken down some of the strongest teams. Not because they were powerful or fast, but because one human knew how to build a fire in the rain. "Tyler," Quick said hesitantly. "Earlier today when we passed you I laughed. We all did. We thought you were crazy for carrying Kira. Thought you'd be the first to quit. And now?" Tyler asked, though he kept his eyes on the fire. "Now I'm alive because you stopped to help instead of reaching the checkpoint first. Because you built shelter for 9 people when you only needed to worry about 2. Because you knew things that our advanced educations never taught us." The Luminian spoke up, her voice like wind chimes. "On my world we learned that intelligence is everything. That physical challenges are primitive obstacles overcome by technology. But tonight technology failed. And primitive knowledge saved us." "It's not primitive," Tyler said quietly. "It's fundamental. There's a difference." Dawn came slowly. The storm finally broke, leaving everything wet and cold but calm. Tyler's fire had burned all night, kept alive by his constant attention. The 9 students in the shelter were exhausted but safe. They emerged into a changed landscape. The preserve looked different, more dangerous. But they were alive. "The checkpoint is about 2 kilometers that way," Kira said, checking her navigation system. "We can make it easily now." The group moved together, nobody wanting to split up. When they reached the second checkpoint, officials were there conducting head counts and safety checks. They stared in disbelief at the group arriving together, led by the human carrying a cerulean on his back. "How did you all survive?" one official asked. 9 students all pointed at Tyler at the same time. Tyler just shrugged, tired beyond words. "Ready for the last stretch?" he asked Kira. "With you?" "Always," she replied, her scales shining bright silver blue. They logged their checkpoint and kept moving. Behind them, the students they'd saved watched them go with something like awe. The weak human and his disabled partner, still going when stronger teams had fallen. Somewhere ahead was the finish line. And Tyler was determined to carry Kira across it, one steady step at a time. The morning after the storm was cold and gray. Everything was soaked, and the ground had turned into a muddy nightmare that sucked at Tyler's boots with every step. His legs felt like they were made of lead. Every muscle in his body was screaming at him to stop, to rest, to just give up. He'd been carrying Kira for almost 30 kilometers now, through terrain that would have been challenging even without the extra weight. But Tyler didn't stop. He just adjusted Kira's position on his back one more time, took a drink of water and started walking. The final stretch to checkpoint 3 and then back to the finish line was supposed to be the easiest part of the course. Relatively flat terrain, clear paths, nothing too complicated. But the storm had changed everything. What should have been simple trails were now rivers of mud. Clear paths were blocked by fallen branches and debris. The easy final push had become the hardest part of the entire challenge. Tyler passed team after team that morning. Crin students who'd sprinted ahead on the first day were now limping, their powerful legs finally giving out after pushing too hard too fast. Their bodies were designed for explosive power, not for sustained effort over 2 days. Now they were paying the price. How is he still moving? Tyler heard one of them mutter as he walked past. We're twice his size and we can barely stand. A pair of Volosians sat against a tree looking miserable. They'd burned through all their energy in the first few hours, racing ahead like it was a sprint instead of a marathon. Now they had nothing left. Their bodies were built for incredible speed but only in short bursts. They'd never learned to pace themselves because they'd never needed to. Tyler kept his rhythm. Step, step, breathe. Step, step, breathe. Don't think about the pain. Don't think about how far you still have to go. Just think about the next 100 meters. Then the next 100 after that. Tyler, Kira said from his back, your breathing is getting rough. We need to stop and rest. Can't stop for long, Tyler said. If I stop, my legs are going to stiffen up and I might not get going again. 5-minute break, that's it. He found a relatively dry spot under a tree and lowered Kira carefully to the ground. The moment her weight was off his back, Tyler's legs buckled and he sat down hard. Everything hurt. His shoulders felt like they were on fire where the pack straps had been digging in. His back was one solid knot of pain. His legs were shaking with exhaustion. What are you thinking about right now? Kira asked, watching him with concern in her golden eyes. Tyler was quiet for a moment, breathing hard. The next step, he finally said. Just the next step. Then the one after that. That's it? That's what's keeping you going? That's everything. Tyler pulled out an energy bar and forced himself to eat it even though he wasn't hungry. His body needed fuel even if his stomach was protesting. If I think about the whole distance, it's overwhelming. 10 more kilometers? That sounds impossible right now. But one more step. I can do one more step. And after that step, I can do another one. Breaking impossible things into possible pieces. That's kind of humanity's specialty. Kira's scales shifted through several colors. Your species is strange, Tyler. You're not the strongest. You're not the fastest. You have no natural weapons, no special abilities. But you have this stubbornness. This refusal to accept defeat. Yeah, well, when you're not the biggest or the fastest, you learn to be the most persistent. It's how we survived on Earth. Tyler stood up slowly, his legs protesting every inch. Ready to prove everyone wrong one more time? Always, Kira said, and he heard the smile in her voice. Tyler got her repositioned on his back and they started moving again. The mud made every step treacherous. Other students were slipping, falling, wasting energy trying to move fast through conditions that demanded slow and careful progress. But Tyler had grown up hiking in Colorado mud, had learned the hard way how to keep your footing when the ground wanted to betray you. Short steps. Test your weight before committing. Keep your center of gravity stable. They were making steady progress when they heard shouting ahead. Tyler came around a bend and found a group of 3 students clustered around a fourth who was on the ground. It was Quick, the Volosian who'd been in their shelter last night. His partner was beside him, looking panicked, and 2 other students had stopped to help. What happened? Tyler asked, already moving closer. He ate something, Quick's partner said frantically. Some of the berries from that bush thought they were safe. Now he's having some kind of reaction. His skin is turning wrong colors and he can't breathe right. Tyler looked at Quick. The Volosian's skin was flushing in blotches, his breathing rapid and shallow. His body was starting to swell. Allergic reaction, bad one. Tyler glanced down the path. He could see the marker for checkpoint 3 in the distance, maybe 2 kilometers away. Other teams were passing them, moving toward the finish line. Every second they stopped was a second lost. Tyler, Kira whispered from his back, the finish line is so close. I know, Tyler said and carefully lowered Kira to the ground. He knelt beside Quick, already pulling out the medical kit from his pack. Kira, you studied xenobiology, right? What am I looking for? Kira's mind switched gears immediately. Volosian biology, allergic response. You need the purple injector. Histamine blocker, but for Volosians it's a different compound. 2 doses in his primary circulation node, left side of his torso, about 8 centimeters below his neck ridge. Tyler's hands were steady as he found the injector. He'd done basic first aid training back on Earth, but this was alien biology. Different systems, different responses. He had to trust Kira's knowledge completely. Here? He asked, positioning the injector. Yes, but angle it 30 degrees upward. Their circulation nodes are deeper than human veins. Tyler injected the first dose, then the second. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Quick's breathing started to slow, becoming deeper and more regular. The swelling began to go down. The wrong colors faded from his skin. "You stopped," Quick said weakly, looking up at Tyler. "You were so close to finishing. Why did you stop?" Tyler was already packing up the medical kit and positioning Kira back on his shoulders. "Because that's what you do," he said simply. "You help people who need help. The finish line can wait." Quick's partner stared at him. "But, we're competitors. We're competing against you. Right now we're just people in the wilderness," Tyler said. "And people don't leave each other behind." He started walking again. 5 teams had passed them during the stop. 5 teams that were now ahead of them. Tyler didn't care. He just kept moving, his rhythm unchanged, his determination unshaken. "Tyler," Kira said softly, "that was the most human thing I've ever seen." "What do you mean?" "Most species would have kept going. Winning matters. Status matters. But you stopped to save someone who was competing against you. You put his life ahead of your victory." Tyler didn't have a good answer for that, so he just kept walking. They reached checkpoint 3 an hour later. Logged in. Turned around for the final push back to the finish line. 10 kilometers left. Tyler's entire body was numb with exhaustion, operating on pure willpower and muscle memory now. Other students watched them pass with expressions Tyler was starting to recognize. Not mockery anymore. Not pity. Something closer to respect. Maybe even awe. The human who shouldn't have been able to do this was still doing it. The Cerulean girl everyone had written off was navigating with precision that had helped a dozen students survive. Together, they were proving that strength came in forms that couldn't be measured in speed trials or power tests. "Next step," Tyler whispered to himself. "Just the next step." "Then the one after that," Kira added from his back. "Then the one after that," Tyler agreed. The finish line was ahead somewhere. They'd get there eventually. One impossible step at a time. The finish line appeared through the trees like a mirage. Tyler had been walking for so long that part of him wondered if it was even real. His legs were moving on autopilot now, his brain barely connected to his body anymore. Everything hurt in ways he didn't know were possible. But he could see the banner, see the crowd of students and instructors gathered at the end point, and somehow his legs kept moving. They crossed the line at 2 in the afternoon on the second day. 8th place. Middle of the pack. Not first, not even close to first. Just another team finishing the course. Except something strange happened. The students who'd already finished, who were sprawled out on the ground recovering or getting medical attention, started clapping. It began with Quick and his partner, the Velocians they'd saved. Then the Luminians from the shelter joined in. Then more students and more, until the entire clearing was filled with the sound of applause. Different species, different ways of showing appreciation. Clapping, clicking, harmonic humming, the rustle of wings, but all of it directed at Tyler and Kira. Tyler carefully lowered Kira to the ground one last time, and his legs immediately gave out. He sat down hard, breathing like he'd just run a sprint instead of walked 40 kilometers. His hands were shaking. His vision was blurry. He was pretty sure his body was going to hurt for the next month. But they'd finished. Tyler Hayes and Kira of Cerulia stepped forward. Instructor Vex's voice cut through the applause like a blade. Tyler tried to stand and couldn't. His legs literally wouldn't work anymore. Kira used her bioelectric field to lift herself slightly, hovering just off the ground, and 2 students helped Tyler to his feet and supported him as they approached the instructor. Vex stood there with his 4 arms crossed, his black exoskeleton gleaming in the afternoon sun. Those dark eyes studied them both, and Tyler couldn't read the expression on that alien face at all. Was he angry? Disappointed? Pleased? "I designed this course with a specific purpose," Vex said, his voice carrying across the clearing. Every student fell silent, listening. "I designed it to separate the capable from the incapable. To prove that physical limitation is absolute. To demonstrate that weakness has no place in elite training programs." Tyler felt his heart sink. Here it came. The disqualification. The lecture about how they'd taken too long, helped too many others, didn't meet the standards. I was wrong. The clearing went dead silent. Students stared. Even the other instructors looked shocked. Kryn warriors didn't admit mistakes. They didn't admit being wrong about anything. "I watched the entire course through our monitoring systems," Vex continued. "I watched a human, a species we classified as physically unremarkable, carry his partner 40 kilometers through hostile terrain. I watched him maintain a pace that outlasted species built for strength and speed. I watched him build shelter that saved 7 lives when our equipment failed. I watched him stop 10 meters from victory to save a competitor's life." Vex's gaze moved to Kira. and I watched you provide tactical guidance that prevented injuries, located resources, and demonstrated that mobility is not the only measure of capability. Your mind proved more valuable than any physical advantage. The instructor's mandibles clicked together, a sound Tyler had learned meant deep thought. Today I learned something that my species forgot in our pursuit of physical perfection. True strength is not the power to sprint ahead and leave others behind. True strength is the endurance to carry others forward. It is the wisdom to recognize value in hyperrealistic cinematic sci-fi scene showing a massive, fully detailed spaceship on a landing platform. The ship is enormous, sleek, industrial, covered in realistic metal plating, glowing blue engine rings, exposed mechanical sections and high-tech surface lights, absolutely clear and perfectly sharp, no fog and no blur. In the foreground stands the single dad mechanic in a worn jumpsuit, grease marks on his hands, staring up confidently at the colossal ship he just activated. Behind him, alien officers and human crew look stunned, eyes wide, completely shocked at what he accomplished. The lighting is natural and photographic. Bright sun hitting the ship's hull, long shadows, clean highlights, crisp reflections on metal. Ultra-detailed textures, 8K clarity, dramatic movie poster composition emphasizing the ship's massive scale.